You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Reddy, and I'm fresh back from holiday. I was on the Costa Brava, and there is still sand in my shoes. There's still the memories of glistening warm seas washing ashore in my relaxed and sangria-muddled mind. But I need to get my head out of the caravan and into the shed because we've got a bit of a season on our hands here for the final 10 races. There is a lot to race for. Everyone's talking about a new champion for 2025 and a close fight in the season ahead. But there's still a fight here in 2024. When the maths says it's over, then we can talk about 2025. Yes, it would be a massive gap to close down. Yes, it would be an extraordinary turnaround for Verstappen to not win the title. But extraordinary things never happen until they do. We are an independent podcast produced in the podcasting shed. With the kind permission of our patrons and partners, we aim to bring you a race review before your Monday morning commute. We might be wrong, but we're first. I'm joined in the shed by our Dutch panelist and MotoGP stalwart. It's Jules Sagers. Hello, Jules.
Hello, guys. I was so neck deep. I don't know what the English expression is
Knee
into
deep.
the Olympics still.
Yeah, neck deep is a lot more sinister. Knee deep is like, oh yeah, I'm just wading through stuff.
Yeah, like fist deep into the Olympics.
Nope.
Nope. Okay, knee deep
Let's stick
into
with
the
knee deep.
Olympics.
Yep.
And so when I saw that I needed to be on for the mid-season Formula One review, it was like, oh, this is something completely different. Need to change my mindset again. And then I realized the season feels like it's all already way past the midpoint.
Yeah, no, and it is, because we've had 13 races and there's 10 to go, and the sprint races are split either way. But I agree with you because I've been watching the Olympics as well. Today, I've been somewhat of an expert in water polo and handball.
Right. Handball.
Handball, yeah, the Danish romp home. We're also joined by sort of adjacently Dutch, Alex Vangeen. Hello, Jeansy.
Hello, Spanners. I'm looking forward to talking about the halfway point of this season, where we have seen the ascension of Lewis Hamilton and the downfall of Sergio Perez. It's been a great last half of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I've done some championship maths, and I expect Lewis Hamilton to win the next 10 races. And if he does so, then Verstappen needs to finish second in every single race. And if he does that and finishes fourth in Vegas, he'll be crowned champion with 2 races to go.
God, but have you calculated sprint races and fastest laps?
I have, and I've put it on Twitter, but no one ever checks my maths on that. So feel free to see if I was right or wrong. And I'm also joined by the wonderful Chris Stevens. Hello, Chris.
Hey, Spanners. I'm halfway through my own little mid-season break as well. And I'll be back at a racetrack soon because I need to be. I'm going crazy in the house.
Do you find yourself commentating on random things around the house? And like, look at Mother with the dishes. Nobody is helping her. Why won't anyone come to her aid?
If I drop something and like, oh, he spun off.
If a bird gets loose in your house.
Okay, right. That's a very inside joke. You have to go back to all our off-season content to hear about the time that Chris Stevens was freaked out by a sparrow in his house and woke up Chris Catman-Turner to go and rescue him.
Wake him up.
The story
it was 4 a.m. That's what Catman told us.
It's his job.
No, he was attending the birth of his son, his first son, at 4 a.m. and you dragged him out. But we do have important Formula One news to talk about. We reviewed the bottom 5 teams last season. Thank you very much to Matt and Christina for leading that conversation. But now we are into the thick end. So we're going to be talking about the mid-season review for the top 5 teams. All right, I'm going to start with McLaren, who I think are the most interesting and exciting development of this season, because McLaren burst back into the top fight last season, back into everybody's consciousness after spending about 10 years, really, in the doldrums. We had that 2013 season where all of a sudden you go, oh, they're struggling to get into Q3, and it just kept happening. And you go, well, surely, they're going to have an uptick at some point, and they kept going further and further down. And then, of course, they declared, well, it's not our fault. It's the fact that we have a Mercedes engine, and no customer team could ever do well, despite the fact that Williams with a Mercedes engine were also beating them. And then we had the McLaren Honda years of absolute disaster, wasting the prime years of Fernando Alonso and Jenson Button. But there was a genuine sense towards the end of last season when they came up with their late season updates that, oh my goodness, this is a car that could be challenging to be, well, in my opinion, best of the rest. And I think they've more than sealed that. But people were starting to talk about them as title contenders. I felt that was kind of far-fetched, but they have had a race-winning car this season. That is without doubt. So they got a little bit of a touch of luck in Miami, where hilariously the safety car assumed that Max Verstappen was the lead car. But if they have had the best car since Miami, which a lot of people are saying they have, where are the wins? Miami was a long, long time ago. And since Miami, there has been one win. There's been a lot of could have, should have, would have, but just one win during the period that many have insisted that they have had a dominant car. So why aren't they winning with the best car, Chris?
Yeah, so it's one thing to build a quick car. It's another thing to actually properly utilize it, right? And actually get the best out of it. And I think it comes down to McLaren almost residing themselves to second place at times, particularly like in the immediate aftermath of Miami, where it was all, well, that was a fluke win, wasn't it? Max is still absolutely untouchable, so we're fighting for second place. And Lando was the one saying, well, no, it'd be on the radio, so, Lando, do you want to do this? And he goes, well, I want to win this race, so no. And since then, okay, maybe that mentality has changed a little bit, but there's definitely a good 5 races or so where they could have won that race, and for one reason or another, they didn't, but it definitely wasn't down to the car.
It feels like McLaren have forgotten how to win. It's a bit like how they say, we can't go to the moon anymore because we don't have the technology anymore. They don't have all the people that were at McLaren at the time when they were winning a lot. They don't have those people anymore. It's an entirely different team except by name. And they don't know what to do. And I think they get confused. They have the fastest pit stop, but they set that fastest pit stop in the middle of a race where they were in the battle for like the top 5, 6, whatever it was. All of a sudden, as they've been thrust to the front of the grid, they have forgotten what they're doing. Then both drivers have gone long on pit stops. I haven't seen drivers do that in ages. They've not had great pit stops in general. They haven't been as quick as they have been, closer to just under 2 seconds. And they are asking the driver, the person who has the least amount of information, what he wants to do. It's like, no, just put me on what you guys think is the best strategy for me to win this race. And they're not doing that. They're just trying to preserve their second place and win the Constructors' Championship because they think that the driver has already gone.
Winning's a habit, isn't it? And they don't have the winning habit. Now, I'm going to sit and argue with people because I don't necessarily agree with they've had the best car since Miami. And my goodness, I've had ding-dong back and forths with people, particularly around the Barcelona Grand Prix, where I thought it was fairly obvious that Verstappen, not only had the fastest car, that would have been my guess. But I think the general assertion I have is that you can't say that McLaren had the fastest car in Barcelona because there wasn't enough information, there wasn't enough data points. But if we take it as a given that McLaren have had, if not the best dominant car over those races, but have had a race-winning car on many occasions, or a car capable of winning on many occasions, what does that say about the outfit and the drivers? Because I say last season, I thought they were operationally fantastic, and they weren't doing the things that Alex was talking about. They were having good pit stops. They were stopping on their marks. They were having good strategy. And then suddenly they've come to the forefront, and all of that seems to have gone away.
Can I pull you up on a slight bit of terminology, Spanners, just for the benefit of this conversation? I think we need to be careful with the word dominant, right? Because having the best car does not mean it is dominant.
I know.
Mercedes in 2014,
okay, Chris,
that was a dominant car.
I have been embroiled in some deep internet battles about this thing, and that may have been hyperbole. I may be in too deep.
I know, and I get it, man. The internet's a terrible place, but I think there's definitely an argument to be said that McLaren has had a car that is on par with Red Bull before the Red Bull seemed to fall away in the last few races, or so. Particularly, I think in Barcelona that was one of them. Austria was another one as well, where it was, contact that ended up ruining that one. That's really the only one where it was kind of out of their hands. But the rest
that was Canada. The sprint, right? Oh no, that wasn't the sprint, was it? In the sprint,
no, that was in the Grand Prix.
Yeah, in the Grand Prix. In the sprint, Red Bull looked a little better.
Yes, they did, but it was a different story in the Grand Prix. Canada is definitely one of the biggest missed goals of the season, though.
I want to add to what you said a bit earlier, Chris, that being able to utilize having a quick or the quickest car, it seemed to me that McLaren have grown a bit too fast for the outfit they are at the moment. As Alex said, they are not the winning team that we are used to that we've been used to see in 10, 15 years ago. And they've suddenly gotten to the front of the grid so fast because it is 1.5 seasons ago when they were pretty much last.
Oh, yeah.
And it seemed that their car was just a dog of a car.
The beginning of last season, Jules, it looked like they'd gone horribly wrong.
It was almost like the worst car at one point.
Yeah, and they found the solution, the right direction early, but you shouldn't forget that even before that they had the years with Honda, they had the years with Renault, and the team was getting drained quality wise. People go search for other places to work because other teams are just doing a better job. So I think they are too fast for the outfit they are at the moment.
Yeah, and it's like going back to what Chris said about Austria. The only reason Lando had a chance at Max in Austria was because Red Bull messed up Max's pit stop, and Lando, who'd had a chance to bring his tyres in, because of the bad pit stop, Max couldn't bring his tyres in, had to go absolute to maximum defence, and that's what kept Lando on him. Before that, Max had like a 5-second lead, and I don't think Lando would have seen Max for dust if he'd been able to actually get his pit stop done right, not be straight under pressure. So yeah, I as a lifelong McLaren fan, I really, really want them to sort their stuff out because they have the huge potential. But also remember, they may have been good towards the end of last season, but they didn't continue that at the beginning of this season. Still in the first 4 or 5 races, McLaren weren't that great. And then all of a sudden, they've started to pick it up since Miami. But they need to be able to bring this fight from race 1.
Yeah, and like you said, asking the driver for what strategy or what shall we do, it all doesn't matter that much when you're fighting for P12, P10, and it's all fine, and you can have a nice little conversation on.
It doesn't make the headlines, does it?
Yeah, but all of a sudden, when these decisions decide whether you're going to win the race or not, and whether you're going to have a slight shot at the title or not. That's completely different, and I think that's what we've been seeing with Ferrari, which we'll probably talk about later on. You need to have people who put down the strategy and who, with all the parameters and all the data they have, decide what's best, and that's not up to the driver as much as we might want that to be the case. It's not.
I think in terms of, I don't want to say weak links. That's going to sound really harsh, but let's just say the pressure is mounting on Lando now to actually start delivering. And I don't think he's quite bringing home the results that team or he himself is capable of. We know he's fantastic. We know he has the potential to be, to be fighting for a championship. But when you look over his time at McLaren, he wasn't the one who scored their first podium.
Monza,
and he wasn't the one to score their first win either. I mean, even Piastri beat him to, okay, it was a sprint win in Qatar, but, a win is a win is a win, right? So I do think the pressure's really on him at the moment.
So we have to be careful
start delivering that,
because there's a big Norris fan base. So there's also a lot of criticism and a lot of anti-Norris sentiment out there. And
but I'm saying this as someone who wants him to do well.
Oh, right, okay. So I'm someone who's been wondering for a long time if the hype is real and how he would match up when it came to race wins and when it came to a championship fight. Now, there has been, let's say, put aside the has he had the best car or not, there has been a lot of races where he could have won that race, and I think everyone agrees the win was on the cards, and then he didn't win that race, and a lot of those were down to a poor start, a decision he made in strategy. A lot of those were in his hands. And so I think it is reasonable to ask at the very, very top level, is this current Lando Norris, who isn't a rookie anymore, who is, Alex, 6 years in to his career, the most prepared, probably F1 junior driver of his intake, all the wealth afforded to him, all the training afforded to him, put in a prime position in a team with a lot of heritage, now fighting for wins, and we can't honestly say he's delivering. You're a fan. I know you're a fan.
I am a fan of Lando. Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, two drivers who, from the second they hit the track, showed race-winning potential with their speed, and the second they had the opportunity to win races, they did.
With Max, like literally the first race he was promoted to Red Bull, immediately won.
Because the Mercs took each other out.
With a bit of help from the Mercedes.
But it doesn't matter. He was still in that position. He was hunted down by Kimi Räikkönen for that entire race. Yeah. And I wouldn't want to be hunted down by Kimi Räikkönen in any sense. So that was, he took the job. He did what he was told, and he managed to get that win. He went, the second he was given the opportunity, he took it. My issue with Lando is, despite how fast he is, and his speed is absolutely not up for discussion or in any doubt.
Phenomenal.
Because he is incredibly fast. But in the 3 instances, he's had an opportunity to win a race, but strategy has been important. He's been asked for the strategy. He shouted at his team over the radio and got the strategy wrong. You don't hear that as much from Lewis.
Wait.
Or
so
much.
Just to fend off YouTube comments, when you say about shouting, that was a couple of years ago. That was 2021. Russia, yeah. When he had...
There was Russia. But even the whole thing with Hungary with Oscar, it was that case of he doesn't keep his composure well. And okay, listen, pressure and all that kind of stuff, I get it, but there's just this little thing that's niggling at me. Having watched many champions in my many years of watching Formula One, and there's something missing from Lando, and being 6 years in, you'd expect them to have it, and I really, really hope he finds it and he gets a couple of good wins through just being the fastest and the best this season, that he can get that winning habit.
Who was it that was talking about there was kind of a mindset of being second to Red Bull? Because even Zach Brown was talking at the beginning of the season, we can finish second, we can do this, whatever it takes, we can finish second. And it was quite
loser mentality
comment to come out with, but maybe reasonable considering where they come from. Now Tim has said in our live chat, hello live patron chat, well, he's second in the championship, 199 points. So maybe a lot of the McLaren and Norris fan base also have that mentality of, whatever else has happened, he's second in the championship, so you can't argue, because that was the stated aim of McLaren at the beginning of the season.
The thing with Lando as well is it's not helping that Oscar is starting to unlock all the
I'm glad you mentioned
secrets
Oscar.
And all the little extra abilities you need to succeed in Formula One. Because if we were going to be brutally honest about Lando, he beat Oscar last year because Oscar was a rookie. You would say he performed better than Oscar because he had much more experience than Piastri, and Piastri's got phenomenal potential, which we all know, and he's starting to unlock that now, which is a big hurry up. And Hungary is definitely a race we're going to look back on, I think, at the end of the year and think this is potentially the first spark of what could be a real problem for Lando.
I think we're gonna I think we're going to argue on this because I still see Norris as being fairly clear and comfortable of Piastri on race pace, and even Alex is piped up. But even the race where he was ahead and Norris got gifted the better strategy to give him track position. Even then, like Norris was able to pull away comfortably, and Piastri couldn't keep up, and they had to sort of bring him back from like 5 or 6 seconds to overtake. So I still have Norris as clear, but there's a huge swathe of the internet that is saying that basically Piastri could have won 3 races this season, including Miami, and had great pace. So there's a lot of people out there pushing the narrative, Alex, that Piastri really could overtake Norris soon.
I still think at this precise second, Lando is obviously still the number one and still the lead driver in performance terms in that team. However, there has been a definite shift in Oscar in the last 5 or 6 races where he's gone, I've figured this out now. And all of a sudden he is going to come for Lando. And I think he has figured it out quicker than Lando did when Lando was in that position. So I wasn't a big fan of Oscar last season, but all of a sudden I've just seen this twinkle of, something special from Oscar. And okay, he won't beat Oscar. He won't beat Lando to the end of the season. Next year, especially if they've got a title-winning car, I think Oscar can be well in it. But however, if we have a Red Bull that's really, really good and a McLaren that's really, really good, and we have Max and Perez versus Lando and Oscar, Max will win because you'll have Lando and Oscar taking places.
What, Max is going to win in an Aston Martin? Oh, don't think so. Jules.
No, a Mercedes, Spanners.
Sorry, I've got lost in the rumours. Jules.
Yeah, thing is, riders or drivers, and especially teammates, they feel, they sense when their teammate is crawling up to them. And Alex is definitely right, because when I prepped for this show, I looked at the results of this season so far, and I kind of take the Imola Grand Prix as sort of a benchmark moment, because that was the first European race after 5 away races, I think. And that was kind of like what was traditionally Barcelona, all the teams bringing updates, So this time it was at Imola. And since that race, Piastri has outperformed results-wise Lando Norris. And of course, that's also due to Norris having a P20 in Austria. But Piastri also beat him in the sprint race there. So I think average Piastri has finished P3 and Norris P5 since then. And drivers feel this. And it made me think of, like, is Lando Norris a killer? Is he a driver who can kill races, aka like just bring him home? And I started to look in his driver history, and he dominated some of the Formula 3 series in the Carling, which was, well, as we all know, sponsored or at least monetized partly by his own family. But once in Formula 2, he only won 1 race there, the opening race of his Formula 2 season. And it was a great season with Russell winning the championship, really with Alex Albon. And Norris, he didn't really string the great results together there. So it made me think, like, obviously he's a fast rider. And it's like Alex says, he's not a Schumacher, Hamilton, a Verstappen, alien type driver. He may be good. He may be very good. He may be a race winner. He may be a future world champion. But is he of that exceptional level? And I think the last couple of races, when it's just factually the case that Piastri is nearing him, and if you think back of how he behaved himself in the Hungary race, as we all remember, it all just breathes that he senses, I'm losing a part of my grip on this team.
Alex.
Lando reminds me a little bit, and you have to know a little about English football for this, but Lando reminds me a little bit of Theo Walcott.
My God. Is that a 15-year-old England soccer
Hang on. So Theo Walcott came into the Arsenal team to take over from Thierry Henry. He had the pace that everyone was really, really excited about, but he just never managed to pull it together and be that champion that Thierry Henry was. But also, thing to notice, F1 put a post out earlier today, I think it was. In the last 7 rounds, Max has scored 116 points, Lewis has scored 115 points, and in third place is Oscar on 114 points. Yeah. And that's the consistency that Lando is struggling with. Okay, there's a DNF in there for Lando, for Austria, but I think Lando has to really use this break to settle his head and think, right, I've actually still got an outside chance of winning this championship. I have to make the team not want to prioritise Oscar over anything, and I have to go for it. He has to the end of this season to really cement himself as the number one. If Oscar can get on top of him between now and the end of the season, next year is going to be very different.
I do want to sympathize with Alex's comparison to Theo Walcott.
Oh my God!
Yeah, as we said, this is Lando's 6th season in F1, right? But he's only 24, and if you remember, he came in as the jolly teenager, and he was all fun, especially in his seasons together with Danny Rick, you know. And sometimes I feel like he's struggling a bit with the maturing thing, like who am I as an adult, as a team leader, as a guy who can maybe fight for a championship and not being the jolly good fella, you know. So that might play a part for him as well. Him maturing, him developing himself as a person.
I mean, it's very similar to 1996 when obviously Alan Shearer went to Blackburn and no one really fancied them, and Chris Sutton, was the key striker, but Shearer just started racking up goals, and it caused a lot of tension in the dressing room, which is a situation we can all relate to, right, guys?
No, you're now just showing your age, Spanners.
And then Chris Sutton always disappointed when you signed him at Championship Manager.
Did I go back too far? I went back too far. All right. I think it's a fascinating situation as it's unfolding, because basically Lando Norris potentially should be in this title fight, and he's not. He should be much closer in this championship fight, and he's not. He should be in the position where there's no way Piastri gets team orders on him to give up a race win in Hungary. He should be way beyond that, but he's not. So there's something going wrong in Lando Norris's career.
There have been far too many points, as a final bit, there has been far too many points where Lando could have capitalised and he hasn't.
And all of that, and Piastri's got a broken rib, apparently. He said he's had a broken rib since the UK, and so that's the breaking story. And Aussie grit, right? Aussie grit. It is painful having a broken rib. I've had a few. I hate that I've had the life where I've had a few broken ribs, but they're very painful. There's not an awful lot you can do about it because you can't put your chest in a cast. And I remember I had one near my sternum, and I said to the doctor, like, it hurts when I breathe hard, and the doctor just went, I don't know what to tell you. Try not to breathe too hard. In my old job, that was not always possible. There's a high level of discomfort around having a cracked, bruised or broken rib. However, in the scope of racing, it is something that drivers live with. You're not going to have an F1 driver drop out of 5 races while a broken rib heals.
I mean, my car has claimed 2 victims with damaged ribs, and that's me and Chris Stevens.
Oh, yeah.
Have both hurt our ribs in my go-kart. The difference is in a go-kart you have a big piece of metal sticking into your rib, which you've had to pull out with a scaffold pole. I imagine F1 cars are much more comfortable than that, and I wonder how he broke his rib, because I don't think it would have been done in the car.
It's possible. Jules, your perspective is going to be from MotoGP, where there's the guys with their head. That guy's head came off and he still won.
That's what they're like, indeed. But now I wanted to say just shortly, Piastri, maybe we are giving him a bit too little credit with all the Lando talk, because he crawled up to him and he's so calm. Some commentators call him a bit boring because he's so calm over the radio, and it just made me think when I heard the Rib story, like, is this the new Iceman? And, I mean, it's almost like you can't really get a sense or a grip of this guy, you know.
It's just Aussies. It's just Aussies. Like, oh no, I've broken my rib. Oh, my arm's falling off. That's slightly ruined my day.
That must unsettle Lando even more, you know. Like, what is this guy made of?
He's very stealthy, I think. And you don't notice when he's doing amazing because he's just there in the background getting on with it. You can't get the kid's heart rate up. And I imagine there's a standout moment of the season for me, which was, I think it was his move on Russell at Silverstone. And he's round the outside of entry. He dips 2 wheels on the curb that's still wet, and he has a big swapper. But gathers it all up while making this overtake. It looks spectacular, but I guess he just sort of carried on. Like, oh, that was a moment. Oh, just carry on.
That's not a tank slapper. This is a tank slapper. We move to Red Bull. So, wow. I mean, we're going to review Red Bull's season so far. Red Bull are winning both titles at the moment. They're winning the driver's title comfortably. They're in the lead in the Constructors' Championship less comfortably. But why does this feel like an awful year for Red Bull? Now, there's a dark cloud that still is hanging over the management for many reasons. They've lost 2 senior figures. Wheatley's on his way to the Audi project. Newey has gone earlier in the season. The team clearly has 2 warring factions in their upper management, and they're in very, very real danger. In fact, I would say in inevitable danger of losing their star driver. Add to that they seem to be obligated to be to hang on to their floundering second driver, and there's rumors have been circulating that basically their plan to replace Perez has been vetoed by Formula One because there's a packed out Mexican Grand Prix to consider. And then you add on to all of that they seem to have lost their grip on the title of dominant car. So, Chris, they're winning everything for the 3rd season in a row, but somehow it feels like it's an awful season.
Yeah, because we're literally watching the wheels fall off the wagon at Red Bull at the moment. It's completely being torn apart from the inside out. And of course, you know, it's all stemming behind closed doors, 2 factions, as you say, spanners, not necessarily upper management, that are at war with one another. And it seems like, you know, all these internal politics are definitely going to result in Max leaving the team, maybe as early as next year. The fact that they have such a grip on the championship, but they've got one guy who's been out qualified by Logan Sargent 7 or 8 times in what is definitely what was at the start of the year the best car. It's so unbelievable the downfall that they have that they've been able to achieve. I can't really quite remember a time a team down spiraled in the middle of a season so rapidly.
I can, and I've said it on Twitter. I can't remember if I said it. I can't remember if I've said it on a show, but Braun 09 is a perfect situation of this. Obviously, different internal management situation going on, but it's a team that dominated the opening part of the season, won all the races, and then all of a sudden, it just fell apart. It fell apart for different reasons, of course, because Braun had their financial issues and whatever. But
they had no upgrades.
But the story is the same, where it's a case of went from total dominance to, holy crap, everyone else is coming after us. We've got to try and find our way back. And they just scraped across the line. And I feel like Red Bull are going to do the same thing this year, but I don't think they'll keep hold of the Constructors' Championship because Perez is rubbish.
There is a very real chance of them losing the Constructors now, I think, with McLaren in the form that they, provided they, you know, gather it up.
McLaren?
Well, they're second in the championship, so they're the ones who've been regularly giving the fight to. I mean, Mercedes are too far behind at this point to really bring that back, probably, realistically.
Look, this is the saving. That's the saving grace, though. That's the saving grace for Red Bull right now, is that
everyone else is fighting.
Yeah, everyone else is fighting behind them. So I know there's a lot of talk about McLaren having the dominant car, but I think we have this conversation in 2 or 3 races time. There's a genuine chance Mercedes have a run their turn of having the fastest car. Chris, I know I've interrupted you, so we'll go to Chris then Alex.
Yeah, I mean, we said it at the end of last year, didn't we? That Red Bull had to when deciding who was going to be Max Verstappen's teammate for this year, they had to go in. What is the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is that McLaren and Ferrari and Mercedes are on our backs, and we need somebody who's still going to finish second to Max in a heated competition.
Sorry, I made Chris laugh there with his. You emphasise the point by slapping into your microphone.
No, I was slapping my hands.
Yeah. Thump the table. Alex does that sometimes when he gets excited. Alex, you go.
I keep knocking it with my.
Don't know what you're talking about,
Alex.
Apologies, but yeah, the worst case scenario had to be that they decided to stick with Perez, and then guess what? It didn't start out this way, but the worst case scenario has now happened, and Perez cannot put it on the podium.
All right, you shook your head and interrupted my carefully crafted introduction to this segment. This is pure rumor, but that was my job. Is hey, the internet said this, expert panel. Prove me wrong, but it does seem like Ricciardo was being slated for a return to Red Bull, and Perez's results seem to justify that. So the rumor mill was that actually they're under some pressure from Liberty Media not to drop their very, very popular Mexican driver. I
don't necessarily believe that. I know that is definitely something Bernie used to do when he was in command of Formula One. I was like, no, you will take this driver. So to be honest, what I'm about to say is probably going to back that statement up, actually, because as far as I know, Red Bull left Spa, or like immediately after the race, they were like, okay, it's going to be Danny.
Yeah.
Or maybe even Lawson. But either way, it was, we're done with Perez. Monday rolls around, Perez is staying.
Yeah. And you're not the only person from the journalistic community that was saying that to me. Everyone was saying, yeah, Perez is toast. And then all of a sudden, like no one was expecting that he would be re-signed. And then that rumor came out, and it sort of made sense. Perez, Jules, is a very commercially viable driver.
Definitely is, and as long as the Mexican Grand Prix is on the calendar, which I don't know for how long that is, we'll probably be seeing him. Thing is, sometimes you get the feeling with Perez that he starts to doubt himself whether he should be in this car or even on the grid, and I think it's a shame to see, because I remember his entrance into Formula One with the Sauber team and having some pretty feisty and fiery displays, and then getting that McLaren seat. And but like, I don't know where I read this, but after the last Grand Prix, I read it somewhere like this is exactly why McLaren said goodbye to him after already one season, because he's not cut out for the real deal, which I want to believe partly, but on the other hand, that's like 12 years ago, and didn't they just move him aside because they could get who could they sign instead of Perez? I forgot.
Literally anybody except Stroll.
Lawson is the prime one.
The issue I have is with what Spanner said before, which is Perez being commercially viable. How can somebody who has been so rubbish now for so long actually be commercially viable? Surely to blindly support somebody when they're being that poor at an elite sport is just doing yourself a disservice. Surely it's that case of, okay, it's almost a bit of an embarrassment that this guy has been given a fantastic opportunity in a top-level car with a top-level team who don't really get much wrong, and all he is doing is getting it wrong. And I want to know where that crossover is it because he's bringing multi-millions of pounds a year because he's got Carlos Slim behind him, and Red Bull looked at the balance sheet and went, we don't want to lose Carlos Slim's money? or Liberty saying, well, Perez brings in loads of people for the Mexican Grand Prix. But no one would get behind any of our British drivers in the UK if they were all rubbish. We'd all want them gone for someone who's more deserving.
What?
It
There was
baffles
a
me.
massive Max Chilton fan base. How dare you?
Was there? I wanted him gone. He was equally rubbish. He was my Lance Stroll.
No,
Chris,
the problem is,
By the way, I actually want Perez gone more than I want Lance Stroll gone. I've kind of resided to the fact that we're going to deal with Lance for a little bit longer. Perez has got to go first.
Okay, and for our Mexican listeners, it's Alex Vangeen, Vangeen, at gmail.com.
Go watch my whole new YouTube video and leave a nasty comment, but just make sure you watch the whole video first.
Somebody watch my go-kart video.
right, we are from a massive motor racing country. Perez is not. Okay. And Jeansy, you answered your own question there. How can Perez be commercially viable? His best friend. Okay. Carlos Slim. Okay. That is just the solution to everything. I know you don't like it. None of us really do. You sounded like you were talking on a phone in a cartoon by doing that. But look, we can sit here and talk about who should be in that second seat until the cows come home. But evidently, it's going to cost Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship, very likely. But it also seems to be more of a sign of how far away the team is from where they started the season, obviously, because when you look at those first three races or so, Perez was doing the job and he was coming home second, or he was on the podium and, doing the job.
Man,
it was all those Red Bull 1-2s at the start of the season, which have suddenly gone.
Looking at the results at the beginning of the season, as I did this morning, and you go, oh my God, I'd forgotten how well it started.
Yeah.
It looked fine. Like if he's on the podium, that's fine. There's absolutely no one's complaining. Yes, we aren't going to say he's challenging for the title, but if he's on the podium week in, week out, none of this discussion is happening. And then in the last 9 races, it's been an absolute disaster. And the really big miss, the one that alerted me a bit, was when Verstappen had a gearbox or engine failure. Was it Australia? And then
Saudi.
Yeah. Oh, was it Saudi? And then Perez was nowhere there to capitalise. But then the last 9 races, he's been off the podium, and it's just awful.
Sorry, I was thinking of something else.
It was Australia, wasn't it? It was
when
Australia.
Carlos won. Sorry, yeah, I was thinking of something else.
Sorry, Jules. Do you want to get in on sort of Red Bull more broadly?
I got a non-commercial, non-financial reason to keep Perez, because the situation at RBR made me think of a MotoGP situation, and I'm not gonna bore anyone with a lot of stuff, but
because you already do that on the MotoGP podcast.
Exactly. Exactly. But okay, we know whoever has been put in the Max Verstappen car aside Max Verstappen, they have blown. Yeah, it's just they've been bad. Perez can be acceptable, and I think Red Bull, as we all notice that their car is starting to fall apart. It's starting to lag,
creak,
and I think Max Verstappen is wringing the very best out of this car, and is squeezing the very best out of this car, and they know he's absolutely doing things with his car. It's probably worse than we suspect it is, but because it's Max Verstappen, it still looks decent and it still can win races. Imagine if you say to a new driver, like a guy who hasn't driven for Red Bull, and you say like, you're Perez's replacement. Good luck alongside Max. So let's see what you can do. And if you know this Red Bull car is like a really, really flaunted. No, what's the word?
Your English is better than my Dutch, Jules. Don't worry about it.
Like it's a car with mistakes, with weaknesses.
Yeah.
Imagine if you put a fresh guy next to that. I think this is their least bad option.
I was on holiday with there was a lot of Dutch people around, and 3 a.m. there was kids on the beach singing the Super Max song. And what really struck me is how you guys put an R in Max. Mox, super Mox.
What a way to ruin someone's holiday.
I know, but I was listening to it and I was like, really? But no, it's right. I love the sport Verstappen has. It's almost ubiquitous amongst the Dutch F1 fans. But I loved seeing Verstappen, particularly at Silverstone. Was it Silverstone? He finished P2 in the end, wasn't it? That was where Lando Norris had that strategy error and didn't go onto the mediums. But yeah, I loved that first stint where things were really going wrong for Verstappen, and he just really kept his head. And it's almost a shame in F1 when you have these drivers who've worked their way into a dominant car, which you can say Hamilton did that. He worked his way to up to having that Mercedes, and Verstappen certainly helped Red Bull develop out of the doldrums, out of the Vettel era into where they are now. And then when they reach that lofty height, they have a dominant car and they can't really show off what they can do. Whereas this season, it's been a bit of a double-edged sword, Chris, for Verstappen, because we've seen the pure pace, but then we've seen him back in wheel-to-wheel action, and that's looked a bit sketchy at times. So Austria, and then the dive bomb on Hamilton, and you go, yeah, well, at least he's back in a fight. But I think Jules might have a point. He's wringing the neck out of it.
No, one thing that makes Max Verstappen one of the greatest drivers of all time is his ability to adapt his driving style to whatever car he is driving. And he is the only reason that Red Bull were ever on the podium in the let's say before they had a title winning car in the high downforce era that we had.
Yeah. Okay. I have a slight caveat to that, but okay.
Some of them, right? When Ricciardo was in the team, yeah. But when we were talking about the era with Albon and Gasly and all that, where no one else but Max could drive the car because he's super adaptable and he's always had this magnificent ability to somehow drag good performances out of bad handling race cars. Even if cars are handling, squirming around more than Australia's Olympic breakdancer, right? There is
no. Hang on. I'm sure that is a lovely and professional lady there competing at the very highest level. That's what I'll say about the Australian breakdancing person. That she qualified ahead of all her compatriots and did her best, and is a student and a professor of that topic.
Yeah.
It wasn't very good, though.
Well, I mean, to be fair, all we've seen Max do the last 4 or 5 races with a difficult handling car is bitch and moan and complain about it.
Yeah, so this is the thing. When I talk about the wheels coming off the wagon at Red Bull, it's much more than just what's happening with, certain people higher up in the team. It's and the Newey and Wheatley and even GP seems to be fed up with how Max is talking to him these days, and we'll believe that Max is going to go to Mercedes in 2026, and that Newey is off to Aston Martin as well.
Yeah, of course he is. Like Joe told us in Miami. He said to us.
One guy told me that, of course, it's Aston Martin. They're the only ones who can afford him.
Yeah, isn't that?
So which makes sense when you think about it. But I'm really fascinated to see how Red Bull gets on in these remaining 10 races, because I think that's going to be very indicative of Red Bull's future.
There is a chance, and I don't think this is too crazy. I think there is a chance where Red Bull aren't always in the top 2 fast cars in the last 10 races. They have enough of a points gap to bring it home, but I think they are in a real bit of trouble, and they could be in trouble next season as well. That is not a healthy organisation, and I think they could end the season with 2 titles and no future.
So to add to this, remember that at the end of next season, Red Bull are saying goodbye to Honda. Or maybe the other way around. Honda are going to say goodbye to Red Bull, and they're going to go to Aston Martin and try to make a winning team there with maybe Adrian Newey or even Newey and Verstappen. Okay, but how much support and how much of their development is going to go to Red Bull especially during next season, when they're also preparing themselves for 2026 rules and a new team. We know the Honda relationship with Red Bull has not always been great.
It ended.
So,
It ended, Jules. It ended 3 years ago.
Yeah.
That's a Red Bull powertrain now. That's
Yeah,
why. That's why it gets repaired in Japan.
that's what
by
they
the way.
wish.
Yeah.
I mean, because we're not hearing great things about the Red Bull powertrain, but also that's just also hearsay and internet rumors. But still, I think we shouldn't underestimate that the Honda relationship is going to end, and whether you like it or not, or whether people people who are working close or with the team are going to admit it or not, it's always going to change things. It's always going to stall things, stall developments. So it's going to play a role.
Just want to end with the Red Bull. Just my slight counter to Chris's point that Verstappen was getting those podiums where Red Bull were a little bit in the doldrums. It's not really related to Chris's point, but I just say that era Red Bull was still the best developing car out of the field. Obviously, the Mercedes didn't have to develop necessarily in that hybrid era. They would just keep an eye on the people behind them. So you can't quite tell what the development pattern is that they could have had. But Red Bull were starting off poorly and then catching up with the field. And that is largely down to the fact that hybrid Renault was so awful. I genuinely think if you put the Mercedes power unit in that early hybrid era Red Bull, that is still a very, very competitive outfit. So engine aside, Tag Heuer engine aside, I think Red Bull has been incredibly competitive. Do you remember that? That's a bit of a blast from the past, isn't it? Yeah. People saying, are you disappointed with the Renault engine? We don't have a Renault, we have a Tag Heuer. So the whole Red Bull powertrain thing, that's not the first time Red Bull have pulled this trick where they've said, oh no, it's not that manufacturer's engine, it's our unique one.
But at least, it wasn't designed or manufactured by Red Bull, but at least they actually put it together. Tag Heuer was literally a badge.
Just a badge. Yeah, it was. Okay, let's move on to Mercedes. Well, as I said in the intro, with Lewis Hamilton looking to win the remaining 10 Grand Prix, it really is down to Max Verstappen to maximise and finish second as often as he can to hang on to the championship. I'm joking, of course, but Lewis Hamilton has won 2 of the last 3 Grand Prix, and he seems to have kind of woken up a little bit. So in a season where Lewis Hamilton has looked poor at the beginning of the season, and I think he has. So, Alex, how many times have we had complete meltdowns watching Lewis Hamilton in qualifying? Like, we've been, as Lewis Hamilton fans, we've been incredibly defeatist because it's just been a case of he just doesn't seem to have put the laps in. And like one session he'll do a great lap and you go, cool, he's on it. And then he won't put a good lap in the next 2 runs.
Who'd have thought watching statistically the greatest qualifier of all time could be so blooming frustrating.
Killing this.
He's driven me nuts the last 3 years. And listen, okay, he's been up against George, Mr. Saturday, and George is doing a great job. I'm not going to deny George or anything like that. But you just expect Lewis to pull it out more often than not. I mean, in qualifying, George and Lewis are the closest team pairing on the entire grid. They are generally split by hundredths of seconds rather than tenths. But he just doesn't seem to get it done. He just makes stupid mistakes, lockups, complaining about the tyres, all sorts of different things. And it's infuriating as a Lewis Hamilton fan because you just know he can do better and you just know you're going to be faced with a barrage of Twitter abuse and all this kind of stuff, which you have to try and defend, which at the moment, apart from obviously the last few races, hasn't been defensible because he has been poor.
Yeah, he's been poor, and then that poor qualifying has put him in the carbon fibre zone, and he's been a little bit poor in the midfield as well, in those kind of, snap wheel-to-wheel decisions. But I know it sounds so stupid to say about the statistically most successful qualifier of all time, but I've always said, all the way back to Rosberg, I didn't think he was the strongest qualifier, and my amateur theory has been that he wants every lap to be that 100% nailed on perfect lap, whereas there are other drivers out there who I'm sure will go, right, let's get the banker lap in. All right, let's make sure I get 99% of what I think I can do, whereas Hamilton seems to very often just go over the edge. But I think my general point with that is when Hamilton has been having a bit of a mare and a bit of a disaster, Mercedes has looked awful. But now he's woken up and he's gotten it together. Suddenly, Mercedes look great. Whereas Russell, in both of those periods, has been broadly in the same position.
It didn't help that Lewis would wait until the last 3 laps of a Grand Prix weekend to actually pull some pace out of his pocket, because he'd be absolutely nowhere. And I think there's a case to be made as well to say that he's not aggressive enough in wheel-to-wheel combat these days. He lacks a certain attacking quality that he never used to lack. You know, pre-KERS and pre-DRS, he was the best overtaker in the field, unquestionably. So not really sure where that's gone. But
age, Christopher,
probably
you will see when
I
age
will
comes
see.
to you. Your risk reward matrix as a nearly 40-year-old is very different to that of a 20-year-old.
But on the more like positive note, because things are looking incredibly positive for Mercedes at the moment. They are the most improved team of the field from the start of this year. Finally getting on top of the porpoising issues and being able to identify the car's actual, pace weaknesses and being able to address those with updates that have actually worked for the first time in this ground effect era as well. And you just see now we're starting to see that old Lewis Hamilton start to come back to the
It's a very different Lewis Hamilton, isn't it? It's very, very different to the one that burst on the scene. But you go, well, what's our criticism been of Lando Norris? That maybe his risk reward and his decision making hasn't quite been capitalizing and isn't what you need up at the front. It's very easy to criticize Hamilton, but I think we would criticize him more if he was getting constantly tangled up in fights and constantly tangled up in incidents like he was a little bit towards the end of last season. So like seeing him tangle with Spa with Alonso, closing the gap on Alonso into Le Combe at Spa, that was quite uncharacteristically Lewis Hamilton in this era, whereas he's broadly been a bit more sensible. We wouldn't want to see more of that, or the taking the unnecessary risk around the outside of, was it a Russell when the
Russell and Max at not Saudi, the other one, Qatar.
Yeah, and you go, that was a bit unnecessary. But broadly, I think you're right. He has been cautious, and I don't know. I think I find that hard to criticise.
Lewis has been equally frustrating in wheel to wheel as he has been in qualifying, because he wimps out of moves that are definitely on, that other drivers would definitely go for. Okay, they are higher risk moves, but when you're not in a all-conquering car and you need to make your way up the grid, you've got to make a few more high-risk moves. But he also jumps out the way of people a lot more than we would have seen past Lewis Hamilton do. And it's frustrating to watch, because part of the reason I fell in love with Lewis Hamilton as a racing driver was the fact that he was this brutish, aggressive racer, was still able to be fair with it. And then it's kind of disappeared a little bit, and hopefully now that he's got a bit of pace it might come back, but he has been a little bit lackluster in the racing department too.
I feel a little bit like he doesn't want to be known as somebody who sends it. So where was it that Verstappen just sent it from about 8 car lengths back and hit him, and the FIA made that weird call? I can't remember where that was. That was
Budapest.
Was that Budapest? That was I don't think Hamilton wants to be in the headlines now for being the guy that caused the crash. I think that plays a big part of it. What is it, Alex?
This is how I feel in my karting. I every single race I come out going, I could have been more aggressive. I should have been more aggressive, but I don't want to hurt my car, and I don't want to hurt other people's carts. So I don't want to
ruin anyone's race.
But on iRacing, it's totally fine, right?
Don't care. It's not my bits and pieces. I haven't got to fix it. I haven't actually got to fix it as well.
I think there's genuinely a part of Lewis Hamilton's psyche where he doesn't want to ruin the race for people, which kind of is a bit of a weakness, I think, if you're going to be in a title fight again.
He never used to have that, and it's not like he ran into people. Okay, 2011, we'll just ignore that. But
pit lane, Kimi Räikkönen, you didn't want to run into people, didn't he? Take out 2 cars in the pit lane.
In his defense, he just didn't see the lights.
He wasn't trying to overtake them. I said when he went for these great moves, he would be so brave as well. Google, find on YouTube or something the one of him passing Rosberg around the outside of the high-speed chicane in Australia back in like 2010. It's probably one of the most stunning yet understated moments of Formula One history. And he is, we're starting to see that back. And the good thing with Mercedes as well is that they won the last 2 races and they won them on pace, and they're back playing that 4-dimensional chess that won them races back in the day.
Yeah, and so Silverstone, they got sort of gifted track position a little bit by the racing gods, but once he was in the lead, I looked fairly comfortable, was controlling the race. Belgian Grand Prix as well. I know the Russell thing. Russell was never in that race. Oh my gosh, the arguments I've had since the Belgian Grand Prix. Russell was never in that race because to make that strategy work, he needed to have extra weight for the entire race, which he didn't have. But Hamilton was in the lead of that. And if you look at his lap times when he needed to have consistent lap times, they have been metronomic. Honestly, if you watch one thing with Lewis Hamilton, watch the closeness of his lap times during a tyre stint.
Sacras in the chat makes a really good point, which is Lewis seems to have grown used to winning matches on the cards as opposed to via knockout.
Oh, I see. So he's going for a points finish, basically.
Which is always the way. He just seems to go, right, okay, I'll win this lap, and then just, oh look, I'm in the lead and I've won the race. rather than dive bombing everybody at every single corner. I think that's a really good way to put it.
Jules.
I was waiting for someone to say what you said, Spen, was about the metronomic lap times, etc. Thing is, I don't fully agree with the Lewis has woken up narrative. I think what you see happening now with Mercedes having a decent car, a race-winning car, instead of a car that is lacking in all sorts of places, is when you see like a top-level driver as Hamilton is. You see the difference between that sort of rider and a really good driver and a really good driver.
Thank you. That's the 5th time you've said rider this show.
I'm so sorry, guys. What I mean with this is, I always think a bad car can be driven by anybody, and you can make it look a bit better, or you can make it look as bad as it is. But what probably is more difficult is to, when a car is good or great and race winning, is do you have that next level on top of that? Can you do that extra magic, your own bit of magic, your own extra layer of talent, of quality that not all the drivers can pull out of a good or great car? I don't know if I explain myself.
No. So he's right, and it's like the comments that Norris made a few years back that have been thrown back in his face recently of, well, yes, he's winning championships, he's winning races, but he's only got to beat 1 or 2 drivers in a car like that. It's easy. You should definitely be winning. And then obviously he's now finding himself in that same position and not capitalizing on it. And he's lost at least 2 opportunities to win races from poor starts. And maybe I think it's 3 in my head. Don't ask me to name them. From poor starts, poor decisions, not being able to get past Max in Austria, which, to be fair, was a difficult proposition. But now, in the context of those comments, you go, well, okay, well, look, when Hamilton had similar situations, he was bringing those home. So there is a quality there, and it's looked bad. The worse the car has been, the closer Hamilton and Russell have been. But when the car's been sort of broadly operating smoothly, like last year, it wasn't the best car, but they had a platform that they were working with, and they sort of had abandoned too much of the experimenting towards the end of the season. And Hamilton finished P3 behind the 2 Red Bulls. So P3 behind the most dominant car probably in F1 history, and Russell finished P8. Now, Hamilton is on a charge now where he's won 2 races pretty much on merit and pace. George Russell is, again, guess where he is in the championship right now? He's in P8 again. So I think when the car's performing badly, they look a bit closer. But when they've got it together and they know what they're doing, Hamilton is stretching away and pulling away from Russell. I think Mercedes have got a huge problem with Russell being kind of the lead driver next season. Even if Antonelli comes in, you start off with Russell being the lead driver. Now, the most concerning thing to me from the Spa Grand Prix wasn't that Hail Mary didn't work. It's the fact that he always has to do those Hail Marys that's a part of his core strategy to get results, is looking for those interesting, can I go super long? Can I go hang for the safety car?
I think it's part of his core strategy against Lewis Hamilton, though. I think once Lewis is gone and he doesn't have that thing of, I have to beat my team, I have to beat Lewis Hamilton, I think once that is gone, I think then he can maybe settle. Maybe he's uncomfortable being teammate to Lewis Hamilton, feeling like he has to perform to a level that matches the greatest driver of all time. And he can't do it. I still think George will look amazing on his own in that team. It's just, unfortunately, when you're paired with Lewis Hamilton, I think it's so difficult. And I think he will calm down once he's team leader. I still don't think it's the best decision for Mercedes to let Lewis go. I'm now really starting to worry. It's not the best decision for Lewis to leave Mercedes.
That's a problem for future.
Orders are on hold.
That's a future Hamfosi problem. We don't have to think about that now.
That's a future Hamfosi problem. So, yeah, it's a really difficult situation. I do feel for George because I am a big George Russell fan, but I think he focuses far too much on trying to beat Lewis Hamilton. Not beat his teammate,
I think that's optimistic.
Lewis Hamilton.
I think that's optimistic. Honestly, I think Mercedes, if Russell's the lead driver in 2023, that looks like a midfield car. Whereas in the hands of Lewis Hamilton, it looked like the second best car over the course of the season. Jules.
Yeah, I think totally agree with Alex. If you look how much of an effort publicly Mercedes made of getting Max Verstappen to replace Hamilton.
That's bad. Yeah, that's poor. That's for
it tells us all, really, because if you really believe in Russell, like Ferrari believed in Charles Leclerc when Vettel left or had to leave, that's just a world of difference.
So I'll just answer a comment from Maria. He says, Spanners, that is a generalization. George is certainly up for a Hail Mary, but it's always a fairly small risk, and he's doing it when the car is not top notch. Okay, good to hear from the Russell fans. I would say it's a generalization that's warranted given the amount of time he goes for the alternate strategy. And I will say it wasn't low risk because in the Belgian Grand Prix, he gave up guaranteed points. So he was definitely in the points. And that the points that he was in was a fair reflection of the weekend. He threw them away with a non-viable strategy in the end, and added it. It's another data point of Hail Mary alternate strategies from George Russell that didn't work. So he is giving up a lot of points, Alex.
The throwing away of it was Mercedes' fault, though. The throwing away of those, because from George's seat, where George was sat, what he did made sense. These tyres feel fine.
Yeah, sure.
These tyres feel fine. Can I just stay out? That sounds absolutely fine. Mercedes should have gone, no, it doesn't work with what we're doing. But they didn't have to say they wouldn't make the end of the race or whatever, or bring us underweight. But they should have gone, no. Him getting disqualified is not on him. Him getting disqualified.
No. But the win was never on. So he didn't lose a win because of Mercedes. He lost the points for sixth place or wherever he was because of the Mercedes decision. I just think it's a symptom of the general trend to go for those old strategies. I would say, show me George Russell's best results where he hasn't done those alternate strategies, and let's compile kind of more data points in that way. Obviously, you can point to Austria there, where he was there to capitalise. But if you look at that trend, it does put him generally behind Hamilton. If you were to run Hamilton and Russell with the same strategies and apply the same kind of quote unquote fairness and team orders that they had in the Rosberg era, I think Russell would be it would be much more obvious. You'd see it. It'd be much more plain. But yes, Alex talking about the decision of Lewis Hamilton to go to Ferrari brings us on to Ferrari. I think we have enough time here, Chris, because I don't think Aston Martin's going to take an awful lot of time. So I think we can settle on Ferrari a little bit. Do you know what? Let's get Aston Martin out of the way if you want. It's a top 5 team.
Alonso sucks. Lance sucks. End of. Brilliant. Next, Ferrari.
It's a top 5 team. I had no idea how, because they've been like not on my radar, I had no idea exactly how poorly they're doing. But they're top 5 by default. Really, we should have included them in, because the points gap is so stark between 4th and 5th. We should have included them in last week's show. It's a complete disaster for Aston Martin, given that a lot of people had them as on the trajectory last season to continue and be title contenders.
Yeah, they are officially Formula B now. They're in that second group of Formula One that are not the front runners, right? It's officially midfield, which is a real shame after what was such a brilliant,
they're nearly 200 points off of Mercedes in 4th place at the moment.
And it's just such a stark contrast to where we were 12 months ago. With this team that was consistently fighting for podiums. I fully think now that Alonso is in his he's in low power mode now, where he's just sort of on tick over. He's not fighting for it as much as when he was going for the podiums. So he's back in McLaren Honda era of commitment.
He's back into full Alonso baby mode, where he just cannot take it, cannot accept it. And when things aren't going his way, his head goes down and he throws all the toys out. I feel an impending argument coming with Aston Martin soon, unless they announce they have signed Adrian Newey. And if they announce they have signed Adrian Newey, we will see a vast change in Alonso's behaviour. This is so typical of Fernando Alonso on the way he behaves in every single team when things aren't going exactly his way. He was a champion of social media last season when he was getting those podiums, and then all of a sudden it's all gone negative again. It's so standard Fernando Alonso. I don't know why people are surprised.
But we are no longer talking about a team with championship potential like this season, next season. They're not in the fight. They're not in the top fight. They're not going for podiums. It's a completely busted flush as far as development goes. I mean, it's unfortunate because everyone was incredibly excited. They'd gotten engineers from Red Bull. Dan Fallows was credited with doing a lot of the work at Red Bull. And when he moved over to Aston Martin, they were like, well, Newey's all fine and well, but really it's Dan Fallows, and that hasn't sort of come to pass. And since I can hear Alex typing in the live chat, I'm sure he's got opinions on that as well. That's it's okay. Hey, it's better than a headbutt, Alex. Things are moving on.
I've got to be honest. I've spent a lot of time arguing. We're arguing about conversations we're not even having on the show in the Discord.
So the thing is, the Discord
stuff that I can't say on the show, to be honest. So if you do want to get involved in these conversations that can't be said on air, become a patron and then you get into the Slack group.
Patreon.
Not Slack, Discord.
Patreon.com/Missed Apex. We would really appreciate your support. And yes, come and join us in our Discord community, which is fantastic. And look, there's a range of opinions in there. They did eventually stop talking about the Australian breakdancing, and we're getting a lot of pushback on the George Russell analysis, particularly my George Russell analysis. And the points are being brought up. And I would say let's wait until the end of the season before we start talking about the points total, because I've got a feeling that Hamilton will accelerate away. But let's go to Ferrari, Chris, because at the beginning of the season, obviously, I suddenly became a potential future Ferrari fan. And if you look at the podiums in the first several races, Ferrari featured a lot, and now not at all.
No, they did start the season, as Red Bull's closest challenger. And of course, were the team to capitalize on their first major fault in Australia that gave Carlos Sainz the win there. But no, it's really gone downhill, hasn't it? Since then, the worrying thing is the latest update package, which seems to have brought back porpoising, which seems like a real step backwards and quite a worry for them for the rest of the season. They've been outdeveloped by both McLaren and Mercedes. That's the worrying thing. And they've had a good car on very particular circuits. Obviously, Leclerc winning in Monaco was a hugely emotional, sporting, great moment, and that no one's going to be able to take that away from them. But in terms of a general challenge for the rest of the season, they seem to be weaker at the moment. And I know Charles managed to bring home a podium at Spa as well, but on the other side of the garage, it's flipping there as well, because Carlos came out of the blocks and he was guns blazing at the start of the year, whereas Charles, it seems to be getting on top of him now.
The Ferrari is a car that has a particular set of skills. Unfortunately, that particular set of skills aren't really honed for winning F1 races and championships at the moment. And I mean, apparently there was a rumor around that the reason Adrian isn't going to Ferrari is because Fred said no. And that would be incredibly...
that made me cry, Alex. That made me cry.
That worries me, because part of the reason Hamilton was so happy to be going to Ferrari is because he obviously thought that Adrian was going there. So, yeah, it's an incredible thing with Ferrari is you watch them from the beginning. I watched a couple of the first race reviews of the season earlier today, and Ferrari were great at the beginning of the season, qualifying in the front two rows of the grid, winning races, being near the front, and all of a sudden, as everybody's picked up the pace, a bit like Red Bull, they've just kind of stagnated and shuffled to the back of that pack. And I just don't... I thought Fred Vasseur was fixing this and fixing the strategies and fixing all of these issues that they seem to have, and it still looks like Ferrari and smells and sounds like Ferrari.
I wonder how much Vasseur can sort of change this quickly, because it's always been a trait of Ferrari, even when Vettel was challenging for those titles, that they just developed slower, or they of the top three, they were the poorest of the in-season developers, and Red Bull would often be catching them towards the end of the season. And that definitely was stark in 2017, 2018. And so it's not really a massive surprise to see them drop away.
2016 for me, Spanners, they started at the end of the first lap in Australia, they were 1 and 2. And then by the end of the season, they had been beaten by Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship.
And 2012 as well, when Alonso was 50 points ahead going into the summer break in 2012. They just have a lot of data points and a lot of history of not developing well in season. Like they need to start off with a blinding car to have a title push. And there's a reason they haven't won a title since 2007. When they have started the season with title-winning cars. They just haven't finished the season with title-winning cars.
Drivers' Championship.
Arguably the greatest car of all time in 08.
2008. Oh, yeah, definitely the greatest.
For Massa to be able to compete for a title, it had to have been an amazing car.
That's a very funny joke. But it's, yeah.
No, I do think that Fred's obviously made quite a significant difference already, because it does seem a very different team to what it was 2 years ago.
All I'll say is to Hamilton fans who are hoping for a miracle next season, if Ferrari don't turn up with like a really dominant race leading car, then it's all gone. So if they're in a close fight and they're getting some podiums and they're getting the odd win, you will then doubt the title push going into mid-season. I think it's that reliable of a pattern.
It is not 2025 though that everyone's thinking about though. It's 2026, and this is when all the big shakers are going to be like that aren't the drivers, basically.
Oh, okay.
That's when it's all going to happen.
All right,
but where is the thought coming from that Ferrari are going to nail these new regulations and they are going to Mercedes this one? I don't really get it. Fact is that after Mercedes' meltdown in 2022, Charles Leclerc was the challenger for Max Verstappen that season, 2022. And especially in the first half of the season, he won races and it looked promising. Fact also is that in the last 18 months, they have only won one race, and that was Monaco this year, the outlier. Like last season, they didn't even win a race. So he's, of course, Leclerc, he's a massively talented driver, but he's never mentioned in the same ranks as Hamilton or maybe even Vettel or Verstappen, right? He's not mentioned there. And that's also to do with He keeps Leclerc things, like
No,
Ferrari
don't
keeps
do
Ferrari
that.
things.
You can't.
Keeps like binning his car every now and then. Like what was it, 2, 3 races ago where he binned it in qualifying?
So
And he
no,
didn't make
yeah.
Q3.
I don't know if this stat is real, but let's just make it up. I wonder if he's had the most Friday crashes of any of the drivers on the grid. He seems to bin it in Friday a lot, and that puts them on the back foot.
Rings a bell.
Politicians make up polling stats all the time.
Yeah,
so
sure. Okay, here we go. Let me start.
But it
again.
keeps
Leclerc has
happening, and it's happening too often for the lead driver. He's supposed to be in such a big team, isn't it? But even then, they have just slipped away, and everybody's celebrating Fred Vasseur as, like you said, Chris. Like, yeah, he's done good things to the team. It's not the same team anymore. But at the same time, they're not winning races, and I think nobody expects them to win a race this season for the rest of the races to come.
Wait, we've got 3 Hamilton fans on here. Are none of us going to be swivel-eyed loons enough to go, yeah, but Hamilton's going there next year, and that's going to make the difference? Are we not doing that?
No, but you know what's from that point of view, and is really depressing, that the reason they give for their struggles is, yeah, we have correlation issues. The wind tunnel stuff, blah, 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 says different things than what happens on the track. Now, where have we been hearing that for the last 2 seasons? At Mercedes. So I'm afraid for Hamilton fans, and it's not a secret. I like him as a driver.
Yeah, but Alex, he's gonna fix it. He fixed it. Mercedes is gonna fix it for him.
How does Lewis Hamilton fix being told to go on intermediate tyres on a dry track?
Wait, that was Leclerc's call,
and
wasn't
then
it?
back to dry tyres when it's wet, and then back to intermediates when it's. I have this worry that Lewis is going to ask things, and we're going to hear we are. What's the phrase?
We are checking.
We are checking
Xavi's
far
gone
too
now.
often, and it worries me. I thought a Fred Vasseur Ferrari would look different, and it obviously doesn't. I mean, with regards to Charles Leclerc, I think Charles Leclerc is highly regarded as one of the fastest guys in F1, and I don't think anyone really argues with that. It's the total package element that is missing, and he's going to have his hands full with a Lewis Hamilton who is going to be reinvigorated, going to a team where he's always wanted to go to, and he's going to want to show up and show out. And yes, I believe Lewis Hamilton can be the driver to make that difference, but I just hope they're not sticking a stick between the wheels on his bike that he falls over every time he's trying to do well.
I think Leclerc's brilliant a bunch of the time. Like, Leclerc's brilliant a bunch of the time, but he does go missing. And the thing that, people have always talked about with Hamilton, and I'm contradicting what I said about his early season, is his consistency. So if he turns up and has a super consistent season, he's going to rinse Leclerc by, like Alex said, punching for points. So if he goes for points victories over Leclerc, I feel like he's going to comfortably beat Leclerc over the course of the season immediately. That's my overriding sense. And, age notwithstanding, going to a new team is obviously a factor. I mean, Matt likes to give drivers who are switching teams 6 months to settle in. But I think by this point, next season, we're going to be talking about Hamilton comfortably being on top of Leclerc, and what next for Leclerc. Because what next for Leclerc, Jules? If Hamilton goes in there and this time next year it looks comfortably like Hamilton's the number 1 driver, that is a disaster for Charles Leclerc.
It is. And on the other hand, I think he must have been included in the plans or possible plans for Ferrari to sign Hamilton. And I think he's genuinely such a good guy and such a racer,
yay.
and a lover of the sport, that he'd just be like, oh yeah, that would be great. If we could have Hamilton on the team, thinking about the team and thinking about what that could add to the team instead of seeing it as a threat. I genuinely think that he's such a guy.
Yeah, but Leclerc made a bit of a worrying comment where he said, "Oh, it'd be great to have Hamilton here. Someone I can really learn from." And you go, "Ooh, you've been in F1 for 25 years. You shouldn't be saying you're going to learn from someone."
True, but isn't this the way he sees himself? I mean, that's such a telling quote, and it's the same thing as when he makes a mistake, like when he bins the car, like a couple of.
I am stupid. I am stupid.
I'm stupid. Blah blah blah. So he still obviously feels like he's still in the early phase. But let me ask you guys this quick quiz question: How many races has Charles Leclerc won?
2.
How many Grand Prix?
5.
7.
Wow.
Oh, it might be 6 now because of Monaco.
How many is it?
Yeah, Alex is right. I'm surprised you guys are so close and correct, because I was like, Charles Leclerc, surely he's won like 12, 15 Grand Prix, but it's not even the case.
But he's had loads of poles.
True. Yeah, but I think he almost already has conceded his team leadership, and he's like, I'm gonna learn so much from this guy. And why not?
That's Matt, you're right, though. You're right. He has sort of basically ceded that number 1 spot.
To be fair, when Lewis Hamilton's deal is worth $500 million, you're definitely not the number 1 driver.
Yeah, but he's 26 years old. Imagine learning for 2 seasons, or working together for 2 seasons.
26, mate.
28.
Sorry.
How old's Verstappen?
He's what?
How old's Verstappen?
Oh my God.
Verstappen's 22 and he's won 8 titles.
So he's the same age as me, Spanners.
Is he? Yeah. So
12.
26 isn't young for an F1 driver anymore. Like, you're a proper veteran at 26. I think it's a little bit worrying the way he's spoken about that. But if you're Leclerc, yeah, you're right. If Hamilton's coming into a team that notoriously favours one driver over the other, maybe you see the writing on the wall a little bit, and you have to make the best of it, because what other option is there once they've made that decision? Would Red Bull want to sign Leclerc if Verstappen leaves? Would Mercedes sign Leclerc? I'm not certain of that, but that will be definitely an interesting battle to look out for.
I think Leclerc will either win a title with Ferrari in Formula One, or he will no longer be a Formula One driver. That's just, he will not race anywhere else.
That was the path. Okay, interesting. We've had a fantastic, I think, race review, season review of the top 5 teams. Better than last week. My God, I think, I'm the best one over Matt, and Chris, you're like the second best Chris at times. So, yeah, I think this was good. A successful panel. We had a Dutch on, and we had a suspect Dutch down below as well.
Suspect.
Vangeen. Your name is Vangeen.
I have a Dutch surname. I have family in Amsterdam, so I do have Dutch family. I'm not quite as a.
They have Spanner stuff from 20
I think
years ago.
the fact that you're offended by the accusation of being Dutch shows you're anti-Dutch. Prejudiced. I'm sorry. You shouldn't be offended. You should have been flattered by my accusation.
It's just a fact.
Okay, Alex, you have a YouTube channel and you occasionally post middling karting content on there that people might want to check out.
Dare you? My recent video of my karting last weekend is an absolute masterpiece at 31 minutes and 36 seconds, and I think everyone should go and watch it. And even if you don't actually watch it, just leave it running and stick a like and a comment on it. Could just boost me in the algorithm a little bit. But no, it's a funny video. Me and Brad off go-karting, mostly revolving around Brad's very funny younger brother, and just getting up to hijinks and racing around in go-karts, which is great fun. And
fantastic.
Going off to go do it again in 6 weeks, and I can't wait.
I will do my best to put the links in the show notes, but Matt normally does that, so I'll probably forget. He is definitely the best one at show notes. Jules Sagers, you're on Twitter, and you tweet things, and you're also on our MotoGP podcast. So I've had an idea, Jules. People should follow you at Jules Sagers, Segeers, on Twitter, but we are going to hand over the keys of the Missed Apex F1 show to the MotoGP crew. So we're going to get Kyle in here to host, and we'll get you to do, an F1 topic, but then we'll hand over for a segment where we do why should F1 fans check out MotoGP as part of that takeover. What do you think?
I'm moved. This is great.
So
this is great.
Yeah. So that means out of the GP, out of the MotoGP crew, you're going to have to pick your 4 best pick your 4 champions to come on over. Excellent. And Chris Stevens. Chris, you're on a bit of a summer break at the moment, but commentary starts soon in the GT something.
Yes. So I got a big September coming up, because what am I doing? Mugello, Red Bull Ring, Croft, and Barcelona, all back to back.
Nice.
Back. So, Ultimate Cup Series and International GT Open events coming up halfway through my summer break. You can follow me on the socials to be up to date on that. It's at Chris on Racing on TikTok, Instagram, X, Threads. When I remember to to check the box on Instagram that says, also please post this to Threads.
Yeah, no. My Threads account is very much the abandoned child.
I haven't even got the app anymore. I deleted the app.
Floundering in the pool. I'm like, oh yeah, Threads. Oh my goodness. But yeah, also follow me. I am on Threads, but just follow me on Twitter at SpannersReady. Richard Reddy on Instagram, trying to post on there more. And if you're listening to us at the end of an hour and a half show in the middle of the summer break where there's no F1 on, maybe we provide enough value that you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Patreon.com/MissedApex. We are here able to do this because of your support and a new PB in the episode charts for the Belgian Grand Prix. We were 28th. We were 28th in the US sports charts, which is only possible because you guys fund us to put in the time and effort. Patreon.com/MissedApex. Help us continue to be that one independent host-owned podcast amongst the giants in the iTunes charts in the F1 world. We will see you next weekend. So next Sunday, we're just doing one show a week for the summer break. And then after that, it will be Zandvoort. And I've already recruited Jules to join us on that because I'm not being racist. I do like grabbing the person for their home Grand Prix. Are you attending it, Jules?
I'm not attending, but I'll be on the show. Definitely.
Excellent. And until we see you next, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast. I pressed the wrong button. I had a really relaxing holiday.